Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue. Welcome to this year's annual information meeting. My name is Kathy Greenbank. I'm the chair of the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan. We're very pleased to be able to be here today, and we thank you for joining us. Before we continue, it is important we acknowledge the land on which we gather. Although this is a virtual presentation, we, the board, and our presenters are in Fredericton, New Brunswick today. This land is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. I have a few housekeeping items for you today. Presentations are in English and French with simultaneous translation available in both languages. For you online, you have the option to select your language of choice. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Closed captioning is also provided for those joining us online. You have the option to turn it on by selecting your language of choice and clicking join, or off by clicking stop. You're welcome to submit questions at any time during the presentations or the meeting. We'll answer as many as we can at the end after all the other presentations are complete. Once again, just click on the question icon at the top of the screen. And finally, a recording of today's webcast will be available on the plan's website in the coming days. Your Board of Trustees is composed of the following individuals. In addition to me, there are 8 other individuals who've been appointed to the board as trustees. Ross Galbraith, Vice Chair of the Board and an international representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Sebastien Deschênes, Vice President of the Edmundston campus of University of Moncton and Professor of Accounting. Paula Doucette, President of the New Brunswick Nurses Union. Mark Gaudette, Chair of the Audit Committee and a retired Assistant Deputy Minister with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Jim Meehan, Deputy Minister with the Department of Social Development. Susie Prudeg, President of the New Brunswick Union of Public and Private Employees. Marilyn Quinn, Chair of the Governance Committee and retired registered nurse and past President of the New Brunswick Nurses Union. Marilyn also served as board chair for 2 3-year terms. And Odette Robichaud, retired court stenographer and past president of CUPE Local 1840 and past CUPE Regional Vice President. We also have 2 observers on the board, Lee Sprague, Executive Director of the New Brunswick Union, and Chris Russell, a Red Seal plumber and maintenance repair worker with the New Brunswick Community College. As for myself, I'm a retired professional accountant. I've been on the board since 2017. I was on the governance committee for 5 years, chaired it for 2, and this is my 2nd year serving as board chair. Your board members have diverse backgrounds, which strengthens the board and its decision-making. Each of us has been appointed to the board by either the provincial government or one of the following unions: the New Brunswick Nurses Union, the New Brunswick Union, Local 37 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Locals 1252, 1840, and 5017. Many of us are also members of the plan. We have a fiduciary duty to the NBPSPP and must act in the best interests of the plan and its members when administering the affairs of the plan. Failure to do so can result in disciplinary actions or revocation of our appointment. I will introduce today's presenters. Yves Plourde, an actuary and partner with the plan's independent actuarial firm TELUS Health. Yves will provide us details relating to the plan's most recent actuarial valuation report. John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vescor Inc., the plan's investment manager and administration services provider. John will provide us an overview of the outcomes from the investment management and administrative services provided to the plan in the 2022 year, and he'll also give us an update for 2023. Since the conversion of the plan in 2014, we continue to focus on ensuring the plan remains secure, sustainable, and affordable. Indicators of the plan's success include its ability to fund inflation every year since it was created while still remaining in a surplus. These outcomes demonstrate that the stable, low-risk investment strategies set out in the plan design are having a positive impact. The low-risk approach towards investments means that when markets are strong, we may not have returns that are as high as some other pension plans. On the other hand, when the financial markets are in a downturn, our plan may have negative returns, but they have proven to be better than the returns of average pension plans across the country. As you are all aware, we are experiencing a challenging period in the financial markets. I look forward to the presentations today that will walk us through how our plan has remained stable and fully funded. For your information, today our plan is comprised of 43,000 members residing in New Brunswick and all around the world. There are several key service providers that we as a board engage to support us in meeting the requirements of the plan, keeping your pension plan secure, affordable, and sustainable. TELUS Health is the plan's actuary, responsible for providing the annual actuarial evaluation. KPMG is responsible for the audit of the NBPSPP financial statements. Vescor Inc. is the plan's administration and investment service provider. Vescor oversees the daily management of your plan at the board's discretion. The firm of Pink Larkin provides legal representation and advice for the plan and the board. We also engage other external service providers to support our board and the plan as needed. We will now move on to our first presentation. The actuarial valuation report, prepared annually and is used by us to assess the health of the plan through the analysis of its current funding status. It enables us to make decisions on granting the annual cost of living adjustment or any other future benefit changes as required by the plan's governing documents. Yves Plourde, partner with TELUS Health, will present the results of the 2022 report. Welcome, Yves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Yves Plourde. I'm actuary at TELUS Health. We were formerly Lifefold and Morne Chapelle. The company name changed a few times over the last few years, but we are still the same team providing the same quality services to your Board of Trustees. I am pleased to be here today to walk you through the results of the most recent actuarial valuation of the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan as at January 1st, 2023. I will start with a short summary of the membership in the plan, review the evolution of assets and the plan about liabilities over the years, discuss the resulting financial position, not only at January 1st, 2023, but through the recent past, and review how the plan's financial position was affected by the market's overwhelming performance in 2022. I will then review the risk management test results that we track annually, and finally provide information on inflation in Canada and review the cost of living adjustment that was awarded by the Board of Trustees for January 1st, 2024. Let's start with the plan's membership. As she mentioned earlier, the number of active members, after stabilizing over the last few years at just under 19,000, has now increased above 19,000 to just short of 19,500. The number of retirees continue to grow as expected for a total of 18,200 at January 1st, 2023. On the asset side, the pension fund, after increasing significantly over the last few years, going to about $6 billion in 2014 to about $9.4 billion as of January 1st, 2022, and has now decreased to about $8.8 billion at January 1st, 2023. The year 2022 was particularly difficult due to the impact of high inflation and ever-increasing interest rates, putting negative pressures on investment returns of pension plans. In 2022, your pension plan investment return was minus 3.87%, which, albeit negative, was a very good return when compared to your pension plan benchmark and against other pension plans' investment results. John will provide more information about the performance in his remarks a little later. Now, in order to be able to determine the financial position of the plan, we need to compare assets of the plan to its liability. The plan's ability is a representation of how much money we believe should be in the fund at the time of the valuation in order to pay all the benefits that members have accrued up to the date of valuation. In order to calculate the liability, we need to make many assumptions about the future. One of those assumptions is the discount rate that we use to put a value of your pension plan liability. This discount rate represents a very conservative estimate of expected investment returns for the future. Last year, the plan used a discount rate of 4.5% per annum. This year, given the significant increase in the level of interest rates and therefore a significant increase in what we expect the pension fund can earn in the future, the discount rate was increased to 5% per annum. This assumption continues to be very conservative, as we actually believe that the fund can be expected to earn over the long term about 7% per annum, being a full 2% per annum above the discount rate. Using such a conservative discount rate provides us with the expectation that more often than not, a plan investment should generate extra funds compared to our discount rate assumption, which will continue to assist in securing the benefits under the plan and providing COLA. Over the last 10 years, the plan's liability went from just under $6 billion in 2014 to above $7.8 billion on January 1st, 2023. You will notice that the assets of the plan increased faster than the plan liability over the period spanning from 2014 to January 1st, 2022, due to the fact that we use a conservative discount rate in the calculation of the liability. This allowed us to build a surplus in the plan, which was able to absorb the downturn of the year 2022, resulting in a financial position on January 1st, 2023 that is still very healthy and which continues to provide us again this year with the ability to provide you with a significant amount of COLA, as we will see later. To ultimately determine the financial position of the plan, the trustees add to the asset the amount of contribution made to the plan in excess of the cost of the accruing benefits over the next 15 years. On January 1st, 2023, those excess contributions for the 15 years following the evaluation date represent an amount of $1.38 billion, which, when added to the assets, represent total adjusted assets of over $10.2 billion. When you divide these assets by the liability, you obtain a funded ratio called the open group funded ratio. As you can see on this graph, this ratio has remained well above 100% over the recent past, which means that we believe there is enough assets in the plan, including excess contributions to be received, to cover all the benefits payable for the lifetime of active members and retirees. The funded ratio has in fact increased from a level of 121.5% in 2014 to 131.7% as at January 1st, 2020, which is just before the start of COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of the uncertainty created by the start of the pandemic in March 2020, and the financial markets retreated in an unprecedented manner, hitting a low of about the end of March 2020, which reduced the funded ratio for the plan to about 122.8 as at March 31st, 2020. However, the markets rebounded almost as quickly as they had come down, and by January 1st, 2021, the funded ratio had returned to a level of in excess of 130% to about 130.4%. Given the good investment performance of 2021, the funded ratio of the plan increased further from 130.4 in January 1st, 2024 to 134.8 as at January 1st, 2022. As you are aware, the year 2022 was an unsettled period for markets. We continued to endure the effects of a pandemic which was still causing major disruptions in some parts of the world. We experienced serious disruptions in the supply chains. Oil and energy prices remain at very elevated levels, and to complicate matters, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. All of these caused significant uncertainty in the markets, which remains to this day, and is causing significant inflation levels not seen in decades, and unprecedented increases in interest rates enacted by various central banks in order to fight inflation. For those of you who attended the session last year, I had provided an estimate of funded ratio to June 30th, 2022, which had reduced to about 123.7%, following a very volatile period in the first 6 months of the year, which had led to an investment of about minus 8% for the first 6 months. Since that time, the plan has actually recovered some of the losses and ended the year with investment returns of minus 3.87%. This reversal during the second half of 2022, combined with the increase of the discount rate, allowed the plan to end the year 2022 with a funded ratio above 130%, which continues to be very healthy for the financial position despite the uncertainty faced by the plan during 2022. The plan has basically prepared itself for the last 9 years to face such market volatility, notwithstanding a few dips in the markets. As time is going by, your pension benefits have become more secure as the funded ratio accumulated a significant buffer above 100%. We may not be out of the volatility for some time yet. Nonetheless, it appears that the battle against inflation is starting to bear fruit. given the last 2 months of inflation statistics published by Stat Canada of around has gone down to about 3 to 4%. Furthermore, investment returns to date in 2023 have been in line with expectations, providing investment returns of about 3% up to June 30th, 2023, which allows us to expect a more stable funded ratio so far this year. In any case, you can rest assured that your plan still has a funded ratio with significant buffer above 100% and therefore is ready to face the market volatility that may lie ahead. Let's now take a look at the certain risk management tests conducted annually. The first risk management test involves calculating the probability that base benefits under the plan will not have to be reduced over the next 20 years. On that basis, the plan scores a 99.4%, which means that in more than 99.4% of the studied cases, the base benefits payable from the plan remain intact. And this score exceeds the minimum of 97.5% mandated by the pension law and give us comfort in knowing that the security for the base benefits is very high. Because the plan meets this test, it can continue to provide cost of living adjustments to all members and retirees. The second risk management test involves the calculation of the average cost of living increases that can be expected to be provided under the plan over the next 20 years. This calculation results in expected average cost of living adjustment of 95.5% of inflation over the next 20 years. The result of this second test is also very positive and indicates a high likelihood that cost of living adjustments are going to continue. The rest of my presentation will be in English.
So this brings me to the topic of inflation and cost of living adjustments. Over the last couple of years, inflation has been a hot topic of discussion, given that it has reached levels not seen in many decades. Your plan's been designed to provide protection against inflation through the award of cost of living adjustments, or COLAs for short. The formula used by the Board of Trustees to determine the amount of COLA which can be awarded every year is based on the financial position of the plan. The board can only use a certain portion of the funded ratio in excess of 105%, which ensures that not all surplus, but only a portion is used every year to provide COLA. This year, with a funded ratio of 130.1%, the excess over 105 sits at 25.1%. In prior years, only 1/6 of that excess could be used to provide COLA. But for this year and future years, the Board of Trustees has proposed a change to the province and the unions to increase this amount from 1/6 to 1/5 of the excess. This proposed amendment was approved by the parties and is now being used to determine the amount of the COLA for January 1st, 2024. Although this may not appear to be a significant change, it did increase the amount that could be spent on COLA from $328.6 million to $394.3 million. The next step in the process is to determine the level of inflation in Canada during the year. Inflation is measured by the increase in the Consumer Price Index, as reported by Statistics Canada every month. For the 12-month period ending June 30th, 2023, so taking into account the period from July 2022 to June 2023, the average increase in the Consumer Price Index, or inflation in Canada, was 5.59%. This is almost identical to the inflation we have experienced in Canada for the prior year of 5.56%. We have not seen average annual inflation of that magnitude since the beginning of the 80s. Given the healthy financial position of the plan at the beginning of 2023 of over 130%, combined with the amendment to the amount which can be spent on COLA, the trustees were able to provide a COLA of 5.32%, effective January 1st, 2024. This increase is utilizing the full amount that they are allowed to spend on COLA of $394.3 million. It is an exceptional achievement by the plan to have been in a position to provide COLA exceeding 5% for the last 2 years. As the table shows, the plan has been able to provide COLA over the years that equals full inflation for every year since January 1st, 2015, except for the last 2 years. Although the amount of COLA provided over the last 2 years has been significant, exceeding 5% in each of the last 2 years, a small proportion of inflation was not provided by the COLA. Many plans do not offer inflation protection, and those who offer it very often have caps which limit the amount that those plans are able to provide. A very interesting feature of your plan is that if a COLA of less than full inflation is provided in a year, such as this year and the prior year, the portion that was not provided remains available to be granted in a future year. The table shows that inflation exceeded the COLA provided by an amount of 0.32% on January 1st, 2023, and 0.27% on January 1st, 2024. These amounts remain available to be provided in a future year. The ability of your plan to provide COLA in excess of 5% is evidence that it is very well funded. Otherwise, it would not have been able to do it. When inflation spikes higher, such as it did over the last 2 years, it is normal to not be able to provide COLA equal to full inflation, because the plan only spends a portion of its surplus towards COLA every year, as shown in the prior slide. This in order to ensure that it protects your base pension. Rest assured that there is still enough surplus left in the plan to continue to protect your base pension appropriately while providing a significant amount of COLA. Inflation in excess of 5% is not normal for our developed economies. That's why the Bank of Canada, along with the Federal Reserve in the US and other central banks around the world, have taken serious measures to fight such inflation through increases in interest rates. And it appears to start to bear some fruit. Inflation over the last 3 months has been hovering around 3 to 4% instead of the average of 5 to 6% level experienced in the past 2 years. As inflation appears to be coming down, it is reasonable to expect that the plan will be in a position in the future to provide COLA in excess of inflation in order to catch up for the 2 years in which your COLA did not match full inflation. This process is not a sign of weak funding or underfunding because your plan is very well funded. It actually is the sign of a well-managed pension plan. I certainly hope that you found the information provided interesting and useful, and that it provide you with a better understanding of how resilient your plan is and how COLA is provided. I thank you for your attention, and I'll remain available for the question period. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves. We're very pleased with the plan's performance and how it has continued to weather volatile markets during the pandemic and this current inflationary period. And I thank you for your detailed presentation on the last 10 years' history of COLA. Up next is John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vescor, the plan's investment manager and administration services provider. John will provide us with a summary of the plan's 2022 results and an update for 2023. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to provide this report with respect to the activities of Vestcor, who, as mentioned earlier, is your plan administrator and investment manager. Vestcor is located in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and has around 150 staff members, in which we provide very cost-effective services to your plan through our not-for-profit status. We have a significant amount of transparency, first of all to your Board of Trustees through regular reporting intervals with respect to our activities against various objectives they have and your investment policy statement. But also, we have externally audited financial statements and annual reports with respect to Vestcor's activity on our website. We are as well overseen by an independent board of directors at the Vestcor level who are selected based on a specific skills matrix determined to be appropriate for a business of our type. We're regulated by the Financial and Consumer Services Commission of the province as a securities regulator and provide regular reports to them as well. The Public Service Pension Plan, along with the Teachers' Pension Plan, are the two guiding members of the Vestcor organization. And as you can see from these slides, provide a significant amount of the assets under management and plan members that we provide services for. With respect to assets under management, it's around 44% of the total of $20 billion that Vestcor was managing at the end of 2022. And you can see the 43,000 members that were referred to earlier make up about 40% of the total membership that we provide services to with respect to your plan. This combination of clients and pension plans allows all to benefit from significant economies of scale, again, reducing your overall costs of service, and allows us to share best practices across the platform of clients and pension plan relationships as well. First of all, I'll address the pension plan services successes for the year 2022. But before doing that, just remind you what it is exactly we do for your pension plan. We provide day-to-day pension administration services with respect to the needs of your membership. And services are provided through in-person meetings or calls or emails through our member services team based in our office here in Fredericton. That support can range anything from anywhere to helping actual retired members or spouses of those members, for example, or other beneficiaries, or active employees who are actively contributing to the plan. A board support services team at Vestcor helps your board of trustees organize their day-to-day or their ongoing meeting agendas, information, and helps with respect to filing obligations with various requirements that they have. And last but not least, our communications team, who are responsible, for example, putting together events like today, our annual information meeting, the annual report that you have access to, quarterly reports, etc. Our communications team helps work with the communication strategy that your trustees have to make sure that that takes place. In 2022, the average cost per member of our administration activities was about $101, which, as pointed out on this slide, is the second lowest amongst a national peer group of public sector plan administrators. That low member rate occurred through a significant continued increase in member transaction and service volumes. And if you were part of this forum last year, you would have noted that the actual transaction and service volumes that we are handling on behalf of your pension plan, but many others, has really increased significantly, particularly since the COVID period took place. So as pointed out here, there was over 10,000 member and employee requests that were handled specific to just the public service plan. And that worked out to be about 2,500 specific applications that took place and were handled by our team as well. Now, if you've ever had the opportunity to be serviced by our member services team, you would have received a member survey, which we look for feedback on the actual service that we provided. And we're pleased to point out again that we actually get a fairly high return rate on those surveys. And more importantly, the survey satisfaction rate remains extremely high. Now let's look at the investment management side of things. And Eve did provide a bit of color already with the investment management challenges of 2022. But before we look at that, let's just remind ourselves what it is that Vestcor again does for your pension plan trustee board. So first of all, we actually advise and deliver upon the investment policy that has been set out by your Board of Trustees to provide that secure and affordable pension plan design that Yves pointed out earlier. And that does lead, again, to lower risk, more sustainable investment strategies that we deploy on behalf of your plan. We're pleased to continue to be able to meet and exceed the long-term targeted discount rate that Yves pointed out earlier, that discount rate that's been determined to make sure that your plan is sustainable going forward. But as well as you'll see, we were able to actually add additional value above and beyond the benchmark set out in your investment policy statement. And in concert with that, continued to make sure that the plan was able to meet those risk management tests that Yves referred to in his earlier comments. So with respect to 2022, I'll just reiterate it was a very challenging year in investment markets. Inflation rates have risen significantly through that period. And again, as Yves pointed out, central banks became very aggressive, whether it was the Bank of Canada, the US Federal Reserve Board, the European Central Bank, et cetera, raising interest rates significantly. And on top of that, geopolitical challenges increased. A number of geopolitical challenges obviously came out of the COVID period, where globalization, it was determined that globalization actually had some significant challenges and some trade imbalances, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine just added or escalated to those challenges that we still face today. All of those events together resulted in a very significant, unprecedented period where both bond rates, which are influenced by interest rates increasing, and equity markets or stock markets both went down together during that period. Usually through a diversified portfolio, you see one moving differently than the other, but we did see most of those markets move together, which was unprecedented during the year. That being said, if you look at the bar chart on the far left-hand side, you can see that the return for your plan of negative 3.87%, which was negative during the year, was significantly better than the investment policy benchmark that's set out in your investment policy statements. So we were very pleased that our investment management activities were able to significantly reduce the return that would have been implied in that investment policy statement. More importantly, though, because as we all know, pension plans are a very long-term obligation, you can see that over the longer term, whether it's a 4-year period, since the plan was converted back in 2014, or even back when the Brunswick Investment Management Corporation, our predecessor company, started managing these assets for public servants, you can see that, first of all, the returns have been higher than the target discount rate that was applicable during the period 2022 of 4.5%. Yves mentioned that discount rate had recently been increased to 5%. You would note that even with a higher 5% target discount rate, those returns over the long term exceed that rate, which is obviously a good thing. And our internal investment management teams have been able to, over the longer term, continue to add significant value over those benchmarks as well. So one of the things that is looked at from time to time is how has this specific plan focused on those lower risk strategies that we talked about earlier, done versus other pension plans across the country. And so for year-end 2022, you can see here that the returns for your plan of negative 3.87% were significantly better than the median Canadian pension plan that experienced a return of worse than negative 10% during the year. This is a survey that's done by the Royal Bank of Canada's Investment and Treasury Services Group. So significantly better. Again, confirming that design of having the plan do better in times of market weakness. That was confirmed in 2022. More importantly, though, again, is the long term. And while we did better in 2022, you can see over the longer term 4-year period, the plan's return of 5.89% was still better than that median pension plan return. So not only did we do better, the plan do better in the 2022 difficult year, but over the longer term has done better as well. And then if we look again back to the plan specifics of that targeted discount rate now being 5%, you can see that since the plan was converted, that 6.55% return has significantly exceeded that amount. One of the slides we've used in past annual information meetings of this type is as well looking at the risk element around your pension plan. We've talked a lot, and Eve talked a lot about the importance of risk and risk management. And so one of the things we want to do is not just compare how well the returns have been for your plan versus other pension plans, but how has the risk been of that plan. And so what this chart shows is a scatter plot of a number of Canadian public sector pension plans that make up that universe of the RBC numbers that I shared with you earlier. It's over a 4-year period, so it represents a longer term time period. And on the y-axis is the annualized return over the 4-year period, and on the x-axis is the annualized risk over that 4-year period. And so as we pointed out already, over the 4-year period, our return has been higher than the median return being in the crosshairs of this chart. But as important is the risk that has been used with respect to getting that return. And as you can see here, the lowest risk is on the left-hand side, and you can see here that the plan has been at the very low risk side of the equation as well. So not only has your plan done relatively better from a return perspective versus other Canadian defined benefit pension plans, but has also done much better from a risk perspective, again, providing that consistency, security, and stability. And then if we just want to look at those numbers on a risk-adjusted return basis, you can see that with respect to the actual numbers, your 4-year return, annualized at 5.89%, experienced a risk number of 7.64%, so a unit of return per risk measure of 0.77. If we compare that to the median plan, you can see that we're almost twice what that median plan's ratio is. So again, just reinforcing that the actual stability and risk management part of your plan is inherent with the returns we've been able to experience to date. Investors know that one of the other important components of returns is actual investment management fees. And because of that not-for-profit status and the economies of scale that we're able to garner through managing a number of other public plans, you can see that our management expense ratio for 2022 was quite low. 0.137%, or as the industry calls it, 13.7 basis points. Now, how does that compare to others? So we've benchmarked ourselves with respect to other Canadian pension plans, other Canadian public sector pension plans, and that return would be about 0.21% lower, that expense ratio, so a significantly more cost-effective expense ratio for your plan. And if we look at that versus some benchmarks of if these assets were managed externally in the for-profit market world, you can see that our expense ratio is about 0.5% or 54 basis points lower or more cost-effective. And if we apply that 0.5% against the actual assets under management of $8.8 billion, you can see that that works out to about $48 million a year that's accrued just through the cost savings. And if we want to take that to a next level, that would work out to about 1,800 actual pensions that are paid just through the cost savings that are inherent with respect to using the VestCorp model. So to wrap things up, Eve mentioned 2023, and yes, markets have rebounded. They actually started rebounding late in 2022. And our returns, as you'll soon find out if you haven't already through your newsletter that's being distributed, as of mid-year was 3.12%. Now, one of the things that's happening in the marketplace is that, particularly in the equity markets, there is a significant component of those markets that's being essentially supported by a fairly limited number of technology stocks that are typically higher risk, and a portfolio like us would have a lower allocation to. So you can see versus the median pension plan, we're a little bit behind, which again, we expect that, right? When we looked at the 2022 numbers, we expect to do better in weaker markets. In periods where markets are stronger, we expect to do a little bit lower number, which we've demonstrated so far in June. But the more important piece, again, is how are we after the 4-year type calculation is put in place. And you can see here on a 4-year basis where the annualized number of your plan is significantly better than that annualized number of the median peer plans. And over the long term, again, much better than that 5% target discount rate. So that concludes my comments. Thank you for the opportunity. And like Eve, I'll be here for questions.
Thank you, John, for your presentation, and thanks to you and your team for the work they do on behalf of our plan. That completes our formal presentations for today. Before we move to the Q&A, I'm happy to tell you that VESCOR is hosting a Planning for Retirement webcast on behalf of the board in October. An email will be sent to all active members in the coming weeks and shared with employers. Keep an eye out for the details of this webcast. It will be a first of many. We'll hold this over the lunch period, and a recording will be placed on the plan's website, NBPSPP.ca. It's open to everyone, whether you're nearing retirement or just want to learn more about the process. We'll now move to the question and answer period. We've received several questions in advance of today's meeting. Thank you to all members who sent their questions in. We'll answer as many as possible today. In addition, if you sent a question that was more specific to your personal situation, they will be answered directly by VESCOR's member services team, and they will contact you by email. I understand that we've, during the presentation, have received several questions that are related to Blue Cross benefits. Our pension board does not cover anything to do with Blue Cross. It's an employer's duty to do that, and they would have boards that would work with Blue Cross on the Blue Cross benefits. So unfortunately, we don't have any information about Blue Cross. With that, I'm pleased to welcome fellow trustee Paula Doucette to lead us through this session. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Kathy. Merci, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you today. As Kathy explained it or mentioned it earlier, I'm Paul Doucette, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees as well as a participant in the plan.
Any questions for the Board of Trustees or our guest who have presented to us today, please submit your questions by clicking on the Ask a Question button that appears on your screen at the top right-hand corner. Note that if you have questions specific to your own pension, we encourage you to contact our plan's member service team, a service provider provided by VESCOR on your behalf. In addition, members have submitted several questions, as Kathy has mentioned. They've been submitted online prior to today's meetings, and we will answer as many as possible. So I have a few to start with now. One of the questions was, I'm new to the plan. What are some of the items I should be watching and considering? And how is our pension calculated? So I'll turn to our chair of the pension board, Kathy, if you'd like to answer that, please.
Thank you, and thanks to the members for the questions. That's a great question, and I'm happy to see that there's interest in keeping track of the pension plan and its calculations. So first of all, I'd like to encourage members to look at the plan's website, NBPSPP.ca, to see information, including copies of our semi-annual newsletters. In addition to that, you'll get an annual employee statement through the mail, which you can use in conjunction with the pension estimate calculator to gauge what your future pension will look like. And as we just discussed, there will be a Pension 101 presentation this fall. Keep an eye out in your email for an invitation to that webcast. How your pension is calculated and much more will be covered in that presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. The second question that we have received, has there ever been an adjustment to our pension to take into account the increase in CPP? And I'll move to Yves Plourde to answer that, please. Yves?
Thanks, Paula. I'm glad to report that no, there hasn't been any changes to your pension plan with respect to the changes in CPP. The two plans operate independently. The idea here is that over the last few years, the CPP have increased their benefits. And so the logic goes that if the CPP increases benefits, there might be less of a need for private and public sector employers to provide as much through their pension plans as they would have otherwise, given that the CPP has taken over a bit more benefits. But what we've seen in Canada, actually, for the vast majority of private sector and public sector employers, is they have not reduced the amounts that their pension plans are providing, including the public service pension plan here. It's working independently from the CPP, and any increase in the CPP will be yours to keep, and the public service pension plan will pay the same benefit that it used to pay before those increases were announced.
Thank you, Yves. The third question: what is our portfolio's exposure to the financial risks of climate change, and how are you protecting our pension assets from these risks for the future? And I'll ask John Sinclair to answer that one. John?
Thank you for your question. So Vescor has a long-serving set of responsible investment guidelines that it's been using to make sure that we consider sustainability objectives with respect to each and every one of the investments that we make, and that's deployed down through our investment management teams. That investment, those guidelines are available on our website. If you go to vescor.org under investments and look for documents associated with our various programs, those guidelines would be there. Last year at this meeting, we also pointed out that we were about to launch our first responsible investment report, which is a report that details a number of activities that are conducted within our investment team and includes a calculation around the actual carbon's emission exposure inherent in the overall portfolio of the assets that Vescor manages. That was our first point in time report. This fall, we're looking forward to actually releasing our second report, which will again provide that similar type of calculation and will show what difference there has been with respect to the emissions data of your portfolio on a year-over-year basis. And we'll continue to do that going forward to be able to monitor what the actual exposures look like with respect to the companies which we invest on your behalf and the active portfolio management activities that we take part in.
Perfect. Thanks, John. The fourth question, and I think it may have been touched on in the presentation, but we'll go to this question now. Is it still possible that the shortfall in COLA increases in January 2023 and January 2024 will be met sometime in the future, and under what circumstances? And I'll ask Yves to answer that one, please. Yves?
Yeah, thanks, Paula. I alluded to that. Well, actually, I addressed it in my presentation, but I don't think it hurts to repeat. I do expect that in the future, the plan will be in a position to recover those amounts that were not taken in the future. In fact, I'm just not having hope. I think it's highly probable that this will happen and probably happen sooner rather than later. The circumstance that what we want to see happen for us being able to provide that COLA is inflation coming down. So as soon as inflation starts to come down to a more normal level, even if it's in between 2% and 3%, then the plan should be in a position then to provide COLA that will take over the two amounts that were not provided at that point in time. And we don't need investment return that are going to shoot the lights out of the park. It's just going to be just regular investment return, I think, is needed. It's what we really need is inflation that comes down a little bit from where it is right now.
Great. Thank you, Yves. Keep your mic on because I have another question for you. Is there consideration being done to change base benefits, especially reducing or removing the 5% reduction applied to anyone planning to retire before age 65? This reduction is unfair. So Yves, if you could address that, please.
When the pension plan was designed, the first priority that was given to the Board of Trustees was to provide COLA. Cost of living adjustments as much as they could to protect the benefit and protect the purchasing power of retirees, and also the accrual of the active members. And that's all found in the funding policy that was adopted at that time. And so the first steps and the current steps that the trustees are going through is to make sure that they can provide as much COLA as possible, as hard as it may have been over the last few years with inflation as high as it is. There are steps in the funding policy, though, beyond COLA, and those are reduction in contributions when and if the plan gets to a funded ratio of 140% or more. If you remember during my presentation, we're now at about 130. We've hovered somewhere between 120 to 134 over the last 10 years. So we're not at the 140% yet, but when we get there, along with COLA, there is a potential for a reduction in contributions for both the members and the employers, and then the establishment of a reserve to provide future COLA, assuming that the plan gets into a rough patch, then there will be money in a reserve to continue to provide COLA, even if the plan might get into a rough patch. Having said all this, there's a point 4 in the funding policy that does address potential benefit increases, and that a change to an early retirement reduction would fall under that category of step 4 for the Board of Trustees. And that would happen only after the plan would be above 140% and had provided somewhat of a reduction in contribution and established a reserve for future COLA. So it's not that it's not considered, it's a step in the funding policy where the trustees will have the ability to propose benefit improvements to the province and the unions, but that cannot happen until the other steps that are more of a priority when the plan was set up have been fully accomplished, and that the funded ratio of the plan gets in above 140%.
Thank you, Yves, for clarifying that and walking us through those steps. I have one last question that has just come in. Again, this is for Yves. The question is, I am curious if the actuary has seen any significant changes in the life expectancy that has been included in projections, such as COVID. So Yves, if you could answer that for us, please.
So COVID has affected life expectancy or mortality, I should say, in the last few years. Unfortunately, we've had some deaths caused by COVID-19, more than expected for the last few years. But in terms of impact of COVID, long-term impacts, for example, how is currently a 45-year-old affected for the next 30 years because they contracted COVID? The jury is still out on that. There is no, it's too early really to be able to study the long-term impact that COVID might have on mortality or just life expectancy in general for our plan members. And so there has been no long-term adjustments made to mortality rates as a result of COVID-19. And we just wait to see how that will impact mortality over the long term before we can make a statement or any adjustment to pension plan mortality for COVID-19.
Great, thank you, Yves. Recognizing that we're getting close to 1 o'clock, we still have one more question that came in under the wire. So before we conclude, again, this is for Yves. And it's, with the employer contributions set to reduce in 2024, how will this impact the value of our pension?
Okay, so there is temporary contributions that are paid by the employer. There was a schedule of 5 years that ran from 2014 to 2019, and then there is a 10-year temporary contribution that runs from 2014 to 2024. So that second temporary contribution ends on January 1st, 2024, but it's 0.75% of payroll. So those temporary contributions are much smaller than the regular contributions. And so they won't have a major impact on the financial position of the pension plan. In fact, all our calculations, because those were temporary contributions, we knew in advance that they were going to cease at some point in time. And so all our calculations have taken into account the fact that the temporary contributions by the employer will cease. And so at the time that they cease, there is no real impact to it because they've been taken into account already. Having said this, the employer is currently, even after the temporary contribution ceases in 2024, the employers are contributing 11.25% of payroll, compared to about 8.25% of payroll for the members. So the employers are still contributing a significant amount over and above member contributions to the plan, even with these temporary contributions stopping on January 1st, 2024.
Great. Thank you, Yves. Bon, nous allons maintenant conclure.
We'll now conclude our question and answer period. Please be noted, if you have questions that you could not ask, you can always do so by email or by phone.
Today's question and answer session will be summarized and posted online on the plan's website in the coming weeks. In addition, a copy of the recording of today's meeting will be available as well on the website in the coming days. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you for having joined us today. This concludes our annual information meeting. Bonne journée à tous et toutes.
Good day to all.
Merci.